So Liz, maybe starting with you. So a lot of people in this audience are familiar with DIU and how it works, but maybe to kick us off, can you talk a little bit about your organization's mission and where it fits more broadly into the defense modernization procurement process today?
Absolutely, and thanks so much for having us and for this great summit. It's so wonderful to be here with all of you. DIU, Defense Innovation Unit, is the organization in the department whose job is to bring commercial dual-use technology into the department and with speed and scale for strategic effect for the warfighter. What that practically means is we work hand in hand with the combatant commands to really understand what are the warfighting needs that they have that commercial technology can help to address. We also have portfolios, technology portfolios in multiple different areas that are constantly out there scouting, talking to folks like all of you in the audience to really understand what types of commercial technology are out there, both to address the needs that we're hearing and also to inform needs that quite frankly, the military might not even be thinking about that it's able to address. And then work in partnership with the services and other innovation organizations in the department to bring that technology in. We prototype it and then field it at scale is how we try to work and do that. That's the core of what we're doing. We're also helping, I think, by doing that to pathfind how we can modernize more broadly. We heard the Vice President and how much excitement there is to do even more of this. And so I think that how we're working and how we're doing that, how Congress is giving us more flexibility to do all of that is also part of what we're doing. Happy to go into more of that in detail if you'd like.
Cool. And maybe then quickly, Qasar, as a starting point, would love to your experience working with DIU. You launched Applied Intuition in 2017, and you started your defense business pretty soon thereafter, around 2019 or so. So maybe tell us a bit more about when you started partnering with DIU and how it's applied to help you scale.
Yeah, just as a context setting about the company, we're a vehicle intelligence company, so we build software and autonomy that ultimately vehicle manufacturers use. So, and then the way that we work in defense is we work both with the primes and we work directly with the DoD. We're a Silicon Valley-based company, and we're truly falling into that dual-use category in the sense of most of our businesses on the commercial side, and then some of our business on the defense side rather than the other way around. Why I think this is, DIU specifically was kind of our path into this world and was extremely, I would say, critical. Before we had a big DC presence and before we kind of knew what we were doing here, that was really our gateway. And I think for lots of companies, I think in many ways we're like a poster child in that, like we have a real defense business now. I think broadly speaking, this concept of dual use, we're in a very special time with the current administration because we finally have folks who are really focused on efficiency. And what dual use really brings is, what we're fundamentally doing applied is, we build this technology on the commercial side, and it essentially subsidizes the work we do on the defense side. And so both as taxpayers, just from a practical perspective, but also as in terms of procuring technology, you want the best and you want it the cheapest. And especially when you think about our adversaries, if you're a Chinese company, you don't get the choice if we're dual use or not. And so I think building up this muscle inside of our procurement organizations is critical. And I think allowing companies like us to really get into that slipstream has been quite, I would say, fundamental. But yeah, it's been a fantastic experience. I can't speak highly enough about it.
So maybe just to get a little bit more specific, maybe we can chat about EPISci, Applied, and DIU. So we heard the news a few weeks ago. You acquired a company called EPISci. It's a defense autonomy company, and it's a company that DIU was already working with. So let's talk a little bit about that journey. How did that come together? What types of hurdles did you need to overcome? How did your organizations kind of work together on this? Maybe I'll start with you, Qasar.
Yeah, so in terms of, EPISci was a standalone company that started as kind of doing SIBRs in, early teens of last year and ultimately built up a pretty significant research arm and technology arm. Applied Intuition, we're mostly focused on land systems and land vehicles over the, let's say, 8 years of the company's history. And I think it was a very natural partnership. We had known the company just as companies know each other. And so when there was an opportunity to acquire the company, it was a fantastic acquisition. We've brought them in-house. But it shared a similar kind of path. Episi shared a similar path to us.
Yeah. And I would just add, I mean, I think when you think about Applied and Episi in particular, it also shows just how much we have to work across domains. And so that's obviously huge for Applied, but it also is one of the themes that we're really thinking about in terms of, how are we fielding capabilities that when you think about space, air, land, sea, undersea. But then more broadly, I think the acquisition's also exciting as we continue to think about strengthening the defense industrial base, right? Seeing more mergers and acquisitions like this. We're also seeing, I mean, every day I feel like I open, the news feed and there's a new partnership as well. There's lots of different partnerships happening. So it just adds to the dynamic time and how we're seeing, just a strengthening of all of these different types of newer entrants into the department.
Love it. So, I mean, we're here focused on bridging gaps between technology and Washington. You're talking about sort of partnerships of all these companies working together. DIU is responsible for bridging the gap between technology and DoD buyers. So how do you navigate those two very different groups? They don't speak the same language. They don't think about things the same way. How do you navigate that at DIU?
Yeah. Well, I would start by saying, I think that we're all working to bridge the gap. DIU plays a critical role, but we're grateful to the American Dynamism movement and many others that are helping to bridge that gap too. It truly takes a village. The first thing is we've made a tremendous amount of progress, as David and Catherine were saying from 3 years ago. But if you rewind the clock a decade, 2 decades, so we're building from, I think, a much stronger foundation in terms of how we can do that. But there is still a ways to go. One critical element, like it always is about talent, right? How do you find what we call dual fluency talent? And it has to exist within the department. It has to exist in companies. It has to exist in funders. Lots of different places that can speak both languages and really understand the different culture, incentives, types of risk, all of those things. But when we further think about bridging that gap, I mean, to me, there's sort of 3 big communities. One is the actual warfighters themselves, who are the ones who need this technology. One thing I think will be really interesting over the coming years is the new generation of soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marine Guardians coming up. They have grown up with this technology. I think of like my son who's in high school, when he's 18, 19 years old or 21 years old and could be out there doing that, they don't know any different. And so if the military doesn't have that,
they're like,
they're gonna go find it some way or another, right? Yeah. So I think that is part of a profound shift on that level. Then you've got like the military buyers, right? And again, I think we're gonna see even more disruptive change coming, but there is a lot that has to happen. We have proven through the CSO model, the commercial solutions opening, that you can move a lot faster and do things competitively, do it in a way that is easy. 40% of the companies that win our solutions every year are first time to DoD, right? So you can do that. And wow. Secretary Hegseth just, in the last few weeks, authored a memo saying that we're going to use that approach for all software acquisition. And again, I think that's a harbinger of more to come. And then there's obviously the work of great partners on the company side, and we have to, again, try to make the department, one thing that I'm really focused on is how do we lower those barriers and make it easier to navigate the department and work with us.
Yeah, and just to add to this, what Liz was saying on this kind of software pathway initiative, if you were building, let's say, a procurement system today, you're building the DoD system today from scratch, you'd probably, first of all, it would be based probably in Silicon Valley in a very fundamental way, and you wouldn't procure purely from a hardware perspective. And the way you can think about this is as a consumer. When you go out to the market and you procure technology for yourself, is the first thing that do you think is just the hardware? No, if you're buying a car, you think about, hey, Tesla has this great software, has FSD. On my phone, I think about the software. I don't only think about hardware. And what's really happened in the kind of commercial industries, there's an abstraction from hardware and software. And it allows companies who do hardware really well to really drive that cost down and to be the best in that business, and to take companies who really do software well to drive that cost down and do that part of the stack really well. And I think the faster we get to that reality, which is the reality that exists already in the commercial market, the better our procurement will be, and the more efficient it'll be, and the better products our warfighters will have. I think it's kind of crazy when you think about how much the technology lacks that our warfighters have versus what's actually commercially available cheaper. And I think that's like, should give everyone pause. And again, I think we're in a very specific kind of opportunity that exists right now with the current administration to really fundamentally look at this, in a new way, in a kind of almost like a venture first way. We're here at a venture funds event at a venture first way, and it doesn't look at it through this, what boxes are we going to buy, and how do those boxes look like the boxes we've bought in the past? And that's a sure way of failure. And that's not the way, by the way our adversaries are doing it. And that's the name of the game here, what we're talking about.
So how do we get commercial tech into the department faster? Big question.
Part of it is that we do know how to do this. We have approaches for how to start getting it in. Like if I think again, the commercial solution opening, we have a way in just a few months' time to launch a solicitation out there and start the prototype. I think the harder work is not that, so we have to scale that and how we do that more quickly. But then we have to really think about, okay, but how are we going to take this successful prototype that works and then move it to actual production and fielding? And that, unfortunately, as we all know, or many of the folks in the audience know, the department works on 2-year cycles, right? Technology works on the cycles of days, weeks, maybe months, but probably more days and weeks. And how do we bridge that gap? The good news is that last year in the budget that we got, Congress actually gave us what we called agile fielding, colorless money that allowed us to help bridge that gap. So there's pathfinders, and we need to expand that. But the bigger challenge, I think, is really about how are we going to move that part of the system even faster. And in the near term, one of my old bosses used to call him, when he was doing really hard things when we were deployed in Iraq, he called himself being a 4-star action officer. And unfortunately, we're still in the moment where we need a lot of 4-star, 3-star, secretary level action officers to drive this in. And as they do that, there is a base of people that want to change as well, and it's going to have to change from the ground up, and there's going to have to be that top cover to enable that change to happen. But we know how to do it. We've changed the military before. I think back to when I was in uniform in the 2000s, and we were able to change when we had to, and we just have to bring that mentality again. But it's not easy.
Yeah, I think, when you hammer everything's nailed. If you look at the commercial side, how does like a big company like General Motors or a Toyota or something like this acquire very similar technologies for their vehicles? And it starts fundamentally, and when we kind of interface with the, let's say, automotive sector or with construction and mining, it starts with the people. If the folks on the buy side are technical, they quickly understand what products they're actually trying to procure. And inside Applied, we have this saying, which is like, the more senior the software people in an organization, the faster that acquisition happens, because then they're not actually kind of delegating that work. And so I think there's something to be taken there as well, whereas with our subject matter experts that exist within kind of the commercial industry also need to exist within the procurement kind of channels.
Yeah.
And DIU is a great first step, but really you need that expertise in the services directly, and you need those people to be quite senior. I think it's not controversial to say that the conflicts of the future are going to be software defined. It's not going to be very traditional conflicts where you have, aircraft carriers lining up or you have tank columns. And so then our kind of debate that we need to have internally is, okay, from the secretary all the way down, who's the first person who really understands software in a very, very deep way, as in they were a software developer themselves, they spent a significant portion of their career in that commercial space, because they can actually help procure much, much, much faster. So I think we talk often about processes and bureaucracies. The bureaucracy is not going to beat Beijing, right? It's not we're just going to process our way to a great solution. It's going to be individual people who know this subject area. So I think if I had a magic wand, it's like we need to take folks who really understand technology and ideally software development, that's the area that's where most of the interesting stuff is happening, and make them very, very senior.
Yeah.
And let them actually drive procurement. And I think, and make some of these decisions. I think you'd have a much, much different answer. Again, let's look at our adversaries here. In China, this is the reality. Engineers, software engineers are very senior within the party and within the defense apparatus, and they are making these decisions. And that's an issue for us. Yeah. We can't be fighting with one arm tied behind our backs, because we think about the world as a hardware reality.
So if I could just add one more, if we could all wave our magic wands, we just have to get this in the hands of the warfighter, right? Because seeing is believing, right? We can talk about it all we want, but once people actually start using it and realize how it doesn't create incremental change, it creates fundamental change in terms of how we can fight. And then when it's in the hands of the warfighter, they can start developing the doctrine, all of the other different pieces. We quickly figure out what works, what doesn't work. We iterate much more quickly. I think once people actually start really seeing and working with it, they're just going to demand it. So if there was ways, that's why the Army's transforming in contact brigades. There's different elements like that. We're just trying to do more of that, and that will be huge as well, and that will also help.
A very specific example that's just happening, domestic OEM car company that is trying to essentially softwareize their vehicles and bring kind of vehicle intelligence. We bring vehicle intelligence to companies. The way they did it, they had a similar procurement issue in these large multi-100,000 employee companies. They're technical, but they have these very, very slow processes. So in this company, specifically the CTO says, hey, I'm just going to send you 2 vehicles to your office, and then you're going to put your OS on there, and you're going to put your autonomy on there, and then I'm going to be there in a month, and I'm going to see it.
Yeah.
And I think that mentality where you're talking about, seeing is believing, is something that we need to embrace on the public sector side as well.
Yeah, we should get a contingent of folks out to San Francisco to ride in some Waymos.
Yeah, absolutely. Or
bring them to DC.
Or bring them to DC.
Or bring them to DC, even better. You talked a little bit about future threats. Both DIU and Applied, to some degree, are engaged in the Indo-PACOM region. So maybe, Liz, how is DIU approaching AI for national security in this context, both tactically, operationally? How are you thinking about the region and how tech can support?
Yeah. AI is involved in we have a specific AI portfolio. AI is also just, in everything that we're working on, like everywhere else in the world. The first great news is we have a fantastic partner that we're working with and, quite frankly, serving in Admiral Paparo, the commander out there who fundamentally gets it as well and is moving as hard and as fast as he can to bring AI, into how we do things in the Indo-Pacific. I think about it in a few different levels. At the more tactical level, how is AI fundamentally, as an example, when you think about collaborative autonomy and swarms of drones across multiple domains, able to interact with each other, given the human direction that it has. That's one example at the tactical level. I think more at the operational headquarters level, how is AI able to enable faster, better data-driven decision-making, all of that, and how are we really just infusing that into how a headquarters operates and makes decisions. Then if you think about the complexity of the Indo-Pacific, right? Half the world's surface, 100 million square miles, I may have gotten that wrong, but of ocean. And how are we also doing this and thinking about how we're gonna do it on the edge in a contested environment? Do we have the energy, the data, all of those different pieces? So we're working really hard at doing that in partnership with him, and we're incredibly excited about it. And fundamentally as well, how is it all based on a foundation of AI assurance, right? How are we doing this with the appropriate data, with the guardrails that we have put in place, so the humans are still doing the pieces the humans need to do, which is making data-informed decisions. But we're working really hand in hand with him to get after it as best we can.
And I know your team has spent a lot of time doing looking at the advanced capabilities that exist in China and where are they tech-wise and what are we going to be coming up against. I'd love to hear a little bit about some of that work and how you think the U.S., you think the U.S. needs to do to remain competitive with what they're building?
Yeah, so just a context set, we're a global company in the sense of Applied has offices everywhere in the world except China. We don't work in China, and so but the automotive industry specifically, the amount of innovation that's happening in China is definitely notable. I do want to put some context on it. Sometimes people, especially in the Bay Area, you have these late stage investors who almost fawn at the Chinese capabilities, but having never actually seen a Chinese vehicle. And then other folks on the other end of the spectrum who are like, no, they're just copying everything. And both of those are not true. The Chinese are innovating, and the way that they've the way that they're doing it, before I tell you, what we've actually seen is, it's just an intensely competitive domestic market for automotive. It's the largest automotive market in the world. There's about a dozen competent OEMs, maybe 24 total OEMs that are fighting it out, and the party has made it very clear, the Communist Party very, very clear that they're going to intentionally consolidate that industry. So every company in that industry is fighting tooth and nail for that annual, so every year they do an automotive show, which is Beijing and Shanghai, alternating years. This year it's in Shanghai. And if anyone's interested in autonomy, you should spend some time in the Shanghai Automotive Show, which is coming up here in a month. We went there last year. We as the company benchmarked basically every major player, tens of hours of videos, thousands of pages of notes, and the short version of it is they've essentially found somewhere between a Tesla and a Waymo in terms of autonomy. But what you're seeing is true innovation. They're copying initially, and now they're kind of going to the next level. It's scary, or it's concerning in a way that these are actually quite mature. These technologies are not, there you can go to the dealership and try, assisted parking in a way that does not exist anywhere in the West. And you're like, this is pretty good. Now, simultaneously, it's not beyond the comprehension of Silicon Valley engineers or companies, broadly in the West, of how it's done. In many ways, even within our own companies, bureaucracy gets in the way. And this is a larger conversation, not only in the government, but on the commercial side, that these mature industries and mature companies, how do they get out of their own way in order to field technologies? And
how do they?
I think, the way the Chinese have done it is partly is, I think, intense pressure. It's amazing what happens when the government tells you you're not going to exist as a company unless you move forward. So there is some advantages of centrally controlled planning there. The downside, though, is obviously that can work for so long. And I think we've seen that open and free economies actually do produce better results in the long term. And so I think to answer that question directly, on our kind of commercial side in the United States, it's just like we were talking about the DoD. The most senior people need to be technical. We've gone from this era where, even if you go back 30 or 40 years ago, I was an engineer, but I did my MBA at HBS, and HBS, all the outgoing people used to be 20, 30 years, they wanted to be at McKinsey, they wanted to be at Goldman. That's not the case anymore. Now, lots of folks who are coming out of school want to be at technology companies. That's a fantastic change, right? Because our STEM strength, our strengths in sciences, technology, and engineering are going to be what defines our ability to compete with our adversaries, both on the commercial side and on the defense side.
Amazing. So I know we only have a couple minutes left.
Last thing I'll say,
yes, go ahead.
Take a chance and go to China. Just fly there and go to the dealerships.
Don't bring any of your devices.
Don't bring any of your devices. And don't stop just reading the blog posts or just hearing, talking heads. If you go there, you get a very real sense of what's happening, and that we are we're in a drag-out fight. We need to understand what's happening on the other side, and not from this abstract, far away, let's say analogies.
I love that advice. Be careful. Maybe zooming out.
We'll read your notes.
Yeah. Watch your videos. Maybe zooming out in our last minute or two. We have lots of founders in the room. As we wrap, what advice do you both have for them about working with DIU? Liz, how and when should startups reach out to you, engage with you? Any advice?
You should absolutely reach out. We want to know what everyone is working on, what the technology is. You know, we often know about and follow companies long before they apply and then come on work with us in terms of a prototype. So we have a whole team of commercial engagement executives that we exist in order to do that and work with all of you and help answer your questions in terms of how to work with the Department of Defense. A number of us are here. You can always email info@diu.mil and we will get back to you as well. So that's one piece. The other big thing I would just sort of say to the founders is thank you, right? As we're all here to rebuild the American defense industrial sector. This is really hard work, right? No one starts a defense tech startup either, and if they're not up for hard work as well. It's hard on all of our sides. So I would also just sort of leave with a huge thank you to all of you for being part of this movement too.
On the, for me to talking to the founders out there, I really am talking to the dual use founders. Obviously, if you're working in defense, you already know the mission. On the dual use companies, I think, let's say 10 years ago, there was more controversy on should you do defense or not. I think that's all basically gone in Silicon Valley. But let me just say, if small and large commercial software companies don't support our government, and specifically the Department of Defense, we're screwed. So if you're a founder in the audience and you're wondering, should I engage in this? The answer is yes. It's a great business decision, but beyond that, it's kind of your responsibility as a citizen of this country in order to kind of lend your technical both products and acumen to this fight that we're in, and it really is a fight. Let's not beat around the bush about that. So the founders out there, it's absolutely doable. I didn't work in the defense ecosystem before. I didn't serve, but it's been, with DIU and others, it's been a fantastic experience. And this infrastructure exists. We're here. You can literally just find us, and we will tell you how to do this. So it's a very direct ask.
Awesome. On that note, thank you both so much. Thank you for listening.